My name's Chuck. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Chuck.
Grateful to be sober. Grateful to be a member of this home group. And man, I had a hell of a speech worked out all week long, and it left me between that chair and up here. So one thing I would like to say is that I'm grateful this home group started up when it did in August of 2000. Was it 2003 or 4? 2003. But anyway, 18 years ago, I had I've been married for about three and a half years. I've just gotten separated. And, with about a week from that happening, somebody, I don't remember who it was, might have been Julie, had called me. It's like, look, they're having a meeting to form a home group in Aberdeen. And I was 11 years sober at the time. And it happened just when it was supposed to. And I mean, I was able to focus on trying to help this stuff get going. And man, I'll tell you what, I don't know what would have happened if it wasn't for that. Who knows? But one of the themes of my story, and I'm sure everybody that's sober, is that God shows up exactly when He needs to. He's always there, but it's the times that we need Him the most that it's obvious of His presence. My sobriety date's March 18th of 1993. I was looking around the room before everybody was coming in. I think AJ and Joyce were the only two people in here tonight that were here when I came in. So they know what I looked like and where I was at. So I brought a picture tonight of a Christmas. I think it was the year before I got sober. I want to make sure I get this back because it's one of the few pictures I have with my mom. She died in 2020, but this was when I was using and drinking, obviously. So I'm gonna send this picture around. If you're kind of blind like me and you can't see that good, all the presents at my feet are socks and underwear. Stuff you can't pawn. And what you won't see in this picture is any pocketbooks because they're on lockdown. Trust me. And my brother's in here too, and he's been in recovery for 29 years also. So, our family's been truly blessed to have two members of our family that were suffering from addiction that have been able to get sober and turn our lives around. So I'm gonna start over here with Ted. Man, I tell you, if you would have told me before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, or anybody that knew me, or any of my family members, what my life would be like today, nobody could have believed it. Not my parents, not my family, nobody that knew me other than the people in Alcoholics Anonymous would have been able to believe it. It was unimaginable, that my life could be what it is today. And I'm sure there's people in here that feel the same way. And that's because Alcoholics Anonymous. But the greatest thing about that is that there's people in my life today that don't know that I'm in recovery. They've never known me like that, and they would never be able to believe what my life was like before I got to AA. If you went up to them and told them this guy was doing this and that and the other, they would swear you were lying. They say that's not Chuck. That's not the Chuck we know. And one of the great things about Alcoholics Anonymous is it doesn't just get you sober, it changes your whole life, it changes who you are. And I heard a speaker one time, one of those conventions or something, he said that if you come in here and work this program on a daily basis, that over time you would change at a cellular level. That's not just outside, that's your whole DNA. Now he's not saying you can go out and pick up a drink with impunity, but you're not going to be the same person that you were in addiction. I think I said my sobriety date, March 18th, 1993. I didn't come to Alcoholics Anonymous to get sober. Almost 30 years ago, November 1992, my younger brother went to the Pinehurst Treatment Center. In the Pinehurst Treatment Center, after you've been in there a couple of weeks, they would bring those guys down here on a bus to meetings. And I'd had a phone call with my brother, and we were ignorant. We didn't know what our problem was. We thought it was one substance. And he called me, and we were on the phone, and he's like, we're coming down to that meeting. Can you bring me a joint? I was like, yeah, man. I said, shit. I mean, if I was in treatment, I want a joint too. And I was hoping he would get over this problem he had, because he had a driver's license and I had a job. So he was like, it was his fault. I was going to be fine if we couldn't go get what I needed. I mean, that's the way we think. But what happened is I came down here to this meeting on a Thursday night. And it was a speaker back then, speaker meeting, the Thursday night meeting. And those guys came in, and I sat back in there, and the smoke was so thick you couldn't even see up here at the podium. And, at the end of the meeting, I walked out to that, right out there where the little used to be the smoking area, and passed him that deal. And that was my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Today I'm standing up here with over 29 years of sobriety. So my message is, no matter why you're here, you kids down there I know y'all locked up, we ain't fools. We know your parents done turned your ass in. But you're here for a reason. God don't make no mistakes. And I didn't walk in that room that night to be a speaker 29 years later up in front of a crowd. But what happened was, God's will for me was to get sober. My brother, obviously, he didn't get kicked out of treatment. I think they set him back a week. He didn't stay sober when he got out of that treatment center. He was 19 years old. I'm 9 years older than him. I was 30 at the time. And maybe he was 21. But anyway, he was younger, a lot younger than me. He was the baby. And it took a little while, and I started going to meetings. And I really started going that was in November, the first year I remember is the marathon. If you're new down here, we'll be having it this year, but back then it was 24 hours. And I would smoke some pot. I'd come down here to the damn marathon, eat the cookies and the brownies, and share at the meeting how grateful I was to be sober. That's the truth. And but what happened was, I hadn't been welcome anywhere for years. Not my parents, not anybody. I mean, nobody wanted me around, trust me. Nobody wanted me around. And Alcoholics Anonymous, they had their hands out, shaking my hand, telling me they were glad I was here. And I remember I met Richard's father. He was one of the first guys I met down here at that marathon back in Christmas of '92. And I kept coming to meetings. And I didn't get a sponsor. I didn't do any of the things they tell us to do. I was trying to stay sober on coffee and cookies and weed. But what happened was eventually I did get a sponsor. And, I still didn't get sober, and I used him, and he would pick me up and take me to meetings. But eventually in March of '93, about 4 months after I'd started coming to meetings, I finally surrendered. And I've been able to stay sober ever since then. I was born a long, long time ago in a land far, far away called Asheboro, North Carolina. And, in Bill's story, when he sees that doggerel when he goes over there to World War I, the headstone, it was an ominous warning. And I was born in Asheboro, which was a dry town. It was an ominous warning. And I always wondered over the years, even after I got in Alcoholics Anonymous, if we had only stayed in Asheboro, if I would have ended up on drugs and alcohol. And about 4 years sober, I met Julie. She's from Asheboro. I knew right then I wouldn't have had a chance. But she's been a good friend of mine for over 20 years. And her and Richard were, like I said, were here from original members when the home group got started. But man, my parents were awesome. I come from a family, there was no alcohol, no drugs. All my sisters are just straight-laced. My younger brother, me and him both in recovery. I was never around any kind of partying growing up or anything like that. I had absolutely no reason to drink other than first time I drank, I loved what it did for me. I just loved it. But I'm just like everybody else. They say we've got a spiritual malady. And I didn't understand what that meant. When I heard that I had a spiritual malady, I thought that meant I got to go down there and get saved at the church. And I've done that. I did that when I was 12, 13 years old, before I started drinking. Well, spiritual malady is a little different. What it is there's something in me that I don't feel good enough. I don't feel whole. I can remember before I ever thought about drinking, I would get in trouble because I would always do stuff because I felt like I needed you to like me. I would do stuff like, one of the things was, we were on a church deal. We went somewhere and we stopped at one of those steakhouses to eat. I talked the guys in, we'll go out. We won't pay for our food. Now on a church outing, I mean, how dumb am I? Well, one of the guys, he caved. They told on us. My mom was so embarrassed. I mean, that was her life, was that Baptist church up there. And at the time, we lived in Maxton. That's where I grew up. I was born in Asheboro, ended up down in Maxton. I don't remember Asheboro or Raleigh. We lived there for a little while. But my dad was with Duke Energy, now with CP&L when I was growing up. And, he was a great father. Coached my little league baseball teams, coached the football. He would bring kids home, and we had 5 youngins, and he was the only one working. And he would bring kids home, the less fortunate guys that he coached, and let them do odd jobs around our house so they could make money to buy shoes and stuff like that. So, that's the kind of family I come from. And my mom, anytime the doors of the church were open, she was there, and she was always, in some kind of group, or if somebody died making food. I mean, she was dialed in. She was like would have been a perfect AA member if she would only been in AA. I mean, she was that kind of church member. But what happened was, I didn't know there was anything wrong with me. I didn't know that everybody didn't feel the way I felt, but I knew that, my sisters and them, when we would go to church, I could tell they felt something I didn't feel. They would sing and smile, and they were getting into it, and I was like, man, I wonder what we're having for lunch when we get home. I mean, is this ever going to be over? This preacher has been on this message way too long, and my mind would race, and it was all over the place, and I was insecure, and I'm just full of fear, and always comparing myself to everybody, and by the way they looked, I could tell how they felt, and I didn't feel that way. And I can remember turning about 13 years old, and up to that point, the only time I really escaped from those thoughts was if I was playing Little League Baseball, or I was playing music. I started playing guitar when I was about 8 years old, with a couple of little bands here and there through the years. But that was the 2 escapes I had. And I didn't do that great at school. I wasn't dumb. I was just afraid to ask questions, and I wouldn't pay attention because I was too busy cutting up, trying to impress people. So thinking that they would like me, And so my sister, my older sister, she's the exact opposite of me. Straight A student. She did shit like study and stuff. I mean, come on. Who wants to do that? She ended up going to law school, got a degree in, straight A's and every kind of award you could make, Page, Governor's School, finalist for the Moorhead Scholarship, 4.0 through NC State 4 years, went to Chapel Hill Law School, 4.0. She would cry if she got a B in school. And I'd be like, hell, if I got a B, I'd be celebrating. You know what I'm saying? But polar opposites, And I love her, but man, it was a lot to live up to. So I took, my deal was, if I can't be the best, I'll quit. I won't even try to be second or third. Everything. I can remember in kindergarten or first grade, whenever you start reading, it's probably third grade for me actually, but they had a contest who could read the most books, and I was rolling, see Jack Run, see Bob Jones, see, how to see this, see that, books we had back then. And some guy got up on me by 2 books, and I quit. I was like, well, it's over, I'm not going to win, so why even try? I didn't read another book the rest of that year. But my first time drinking alcohol, not my first time drinking alcohol, my first time catching a buzz, we were camping out down there at 795 South Austin Street, in my backyard, out in the little woods over there on the side, and we had us a little campfire. I was with a guy and his father owned the Firestone store, and my other friend Randy, his dad owned the Safeway supermarket. I felt inferior to those guys. Their parents were business owners. My dad climbed poles for a living. And we had stolen some wine coolers. We'd had beer before. I'd never been able to drink enough beer to catch a buzz. We got wine coolers, and it was fall. I would say it was probably September or October. It was just chilly enough that those wine coolers had sat out there, in the woods for a couple of days since we'd stolen them from Randy's dad's grocery store. And I popped the top on one of them bad boys, and I took me a couple of swallowers, and I was like, shit, this ain't nothing like that nasty Miller or that Slip's malt liquor. Like, this ain't bad at all. And about that third swallow, it started happening, y'all. If you're alcoholic, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I can feel it spreading out. My ears got smaller. I think I even grew a pubic hair. I was way behind, trust me. I weighed about 60 pounds in the 8th grade. And if you look at that picture, I was about 90 when I came to AA. But I'm going to tell you right now, man, it was a miracle. It was a miracle. My life changed. It was a spiritual awakening. I've been looking for that my whole life. I got drunk as a billy goat that night. I blacked out. I don't remember anything. I obviously threw up because everything was purple the next morning. It felt like a mouse had slept in my mouth. My head was like a Roadrunner cartoon, when he dropped the damn thing on his foot or something, and it would go like that. I mean, that's what it was doing. And all I wanted to do was do it again. And if I could have, I was 13, I would have stayed out there in that tent the rest of my life and drank. But I couldn't do that. And here's the deal. It wasn't but about 10 or 12 years later, about 3 miles from there, I was living in a tent in the woods. And it wasn't fun at all. That's where my drug and alcohol use took me. And, I couldn't wait to drink again. My mom and dad are Baptists, First Baptist, and there wasn't no alcohol in our house. I didn't know about vanilla extract or none of that stuff that I learned about once I came into AA. I didn't know you could take shoe polish and pour it through white bread. And I found all that out from them people down there in Hamlet on the railroad when they would speak. Old Joe Lewis and Daryl C. and them guys. When I got to AA, I was like, damn, I missed out. All those times I could have been high as a kite and shit sitting right there in the drawer, and I didn't even know about it. And I'm out there trying to steal stuff or huffing gas or something. I mean, be careful what there's old time railroad guys now. They knew how to drink. There was one guy that drank Aquavell. I remember his story. He said he had the best smelling farts in the damn town. But he didn't want anybody to know he was drinking, so he was drinking. He buying Alcovel for about a case. But anybody doesn't know what that is, that's aftershave back in the 70s. I mean, that was the kind of stuff I heard when I came to. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, it's the best entertainment you can get for a buck. But every opportunity I got from that point on, I drank, and I never drank just to look cool or to fit in or to catch a little buzz. I hammered it. I mean, I'm a blackout drinker every time. I'd chug the beer as hard as I could. I'd chug the whiskey as hard as I could. And when I started doing the other substances, I did those just as hard as I could. I think it's a requirement now to apologize for having drugs in your story. So I'm going to tell my one drug story. And I'm apologizing right now for telling it. And I was riding down the road the other day, listening to the country radio station, and an infomercial came on that said, would you like to know how to lose a pound of fat a week? And I was like, hell, I know how to lose a pound of fat a day. It's called crack cocaine. And that's where I was at when I walked in Alcoholics Anonymous in 1993. So just so you know, I drank a lot, and I did a lot of other stuff, and you can tell from that picture I'm looking pretty bad. I've been up all that night, trust me. But I love to smoke pot, and I love to do that other stuff, but nothing did for me what alcohol did for me. And, I ended up getting into high school. Things got a little easier. We were able to get alcohol. I had one of those guys I got drunk with that first night. He had failed a grade. He was a year older. And down there, if you drove up, there was one store over there on Highway 71 going out towards Red Springs called Carlin's in Maxton, North Carolina. Carlin didn't give a shit. If you drove up in his parking lot in a car, he would sell you beer or wine. And we did. Jody had a badass 1968 Chevelle, and that car was bad. We get us a couple of tall boy beers and ride around after school and listen to Leonard Skinner over and over and over. They just come out with the Pronounce album. And we loved it. That's all we heard. We wore that. That was an 8-track tape, by the way. Anybody knows what that is? We had to end up splicing that sucker back together. We were playing so much. But one tall boy beer would get me drunk. I mean, I weighed 60 pounds. And he would drop me off down there at my house. And he had to go work over at his dad's Firestone store. And I would go in and take a nap. And my mom, she was busy taking care of my younger brother and my sister because they were, both 5 and 3 or 4 or whatever. And, I'd take a nap. I'd get up, go in there and eat dinner. And this would happen 2 or 3 times a week. And then it started where we would start partying on the weekends. And eventually, ended up getting into high school. Well, I was already in high school, but I started doing some other stuff, some other substances, mainly organic, stuff that grows on those plants. And I fell in love with that because I could do that at school, and I thought nobody knew it. So that became a regular deal. And I was an entrepreneur in school. I was selling counterfeit lunch tickets. I was way ahead of Walmart. I started 3 joints for $1 before they ever thought about having a blue light special. And that's how I financed my stuff, selling lunch tickets and other stuff. And I would, it was fun. And I loved alcohol. It was fun. I've got a good story I forgot to tell. I was going to start with it, but I'm an electrical contractor, and I work construction. And you get to see a lot of stuff when you work construction. And I was on a house Monday, and these plumbers pulled up, and there's 2 boys. And one of them's probably, I won't say he might be 18, the other one's 19. And the younger one, he got out, and he was walking with one leg like this. I thought, damn, what's going on with him? The other boy got out and he had 2 black eyes. You know what? I was like, damn, I remember when my drinking was fun too. I was thinking about putting some literature up on the dash of their truck, but I was like, I don't want to ruin anybody's drinking. Their boys will come around if it's time. They're up there in Montgomery County, they start early. But good kids, man, good kids. But we can spot it. We spot it before anybody knows it. But I ended up graduating high school. I flunked out. I didn't go to enough classes my junior year, and I went to a summer school. Then my senior year, I just decided I'm not going to go. And I had a vehicle, and I would take I've got a younger sister that's 2 years behind me, and then I've got Sylvia and Thomas, which they were over at the tip. My brother's Thomas, the younger one, but they're 2 years apart, so she's 7 years younger than me. So I had to take everybody to school. And I had a little old Volkswagen Bug, and I would drop them off over at the R.B. Dean school over there. And then I'd pull in the parking lot, and I'd get out with my stuff and wait and watch my sister Jolena, who's a tattletale, by the way. And she would go, and as soon as she got around the corner to go into her class, I'd go run back out to the parking lot. And anybody that wanted to skip and go get high that day knew I had a car would be out there waiting on me. So I did that for about the first 30 or 40 days, and they sent a letter, those jokers. They mailed a letter to my parents. It's like, Chuck hadn't been to school this year. If he misses any more days, he's not going to be coming back. So my dad's like, what's the point? I was like, you're right. He's like, you go get a job. And my mom's like, oh, hell no. But anyway, eventually I did end up getting, I had missed too many days. There was no way I could graduate. I only needed 1 English course to graduate because it was required to have English every year. And I ended up going to night school. And my mom forced me to go to night school. And night school was like a club. The teachers were getting high. We were getting high. It was me and everybody that had been in juvenile or gotten kicked out of school, girls that got pregnant. And it was pretty nice, I'll be honest with you. And I ended up passing. I graduated with my class, And then I went on like a 2-year graduation party. Didn't get a job, didn't do anything, but get high and drink, bum. And I had it figured out. A lot of my friends worked first shift. A lot of my friends worked second shift over at the glass plant in Laurinburg. So I figured out, if I timed it just right, I could get up and go walk into town or ride my bike into town. And those second shift guys, they'd be getting high they start about 1 or 2 o'clock before they go to work. About the time they have to go to work, the first shift guys getting out, they're ready to drink and party. You know what I'm saying? So I had it figured out. I had a buddy that worked he would always had a job. God bless him. He died a few years ago with cancer in his early 50s. But he was my best friend, Ronnie Stone. And he always worked at one of the Nick's Pick or whatever. And I would go in there and he would go around and unlock the back door. And when he was taking the boxes out and stocking the beer into coolers, he would put a couple of 6-packs or whatever we needed in those boxes. And he would put them out the back door. I'd go around there, scoop them up, take them over there, put them in the truck. And that was my life. And I was always getting hurt and stuff. But one of the worst, like those guys I was talking about, those plumbers. I see them coming a mile away. But I was always bruised up. And I remember the worst I ever got hurt. We were. Madison's a little small town. I don't know if anybody knows where it's at. There's one stoplight and a railroad track. And the cops don't have anything to do but harass kids like me. And we're out there one night. We're parked right there by where he works, smoking pot and drinking. And they blue light us, and we all jump out and run. That's what you do. And I took off down through the alley behind that damn store, and I hit a dumpster. The things I picked the dumpster up with. That sucker took me out. And I landed on my back, and I'm looking up, and Jerome Briggs, he was the one that always harassed us. Nice guy, super nice guy, but he's just doing his job. He's laughing. He said, "I'm not even going to bother messing with you." He's like, you got exactly what you deserve. And I was like, "You got me, boy, I tell you." But that was my life, And I was still having fun. I was still having fun. That was fun. That's what I considered fun. It hadn't turned into what it did at the end, where I just wanted to die. I was just, my mom would be taking me to work, and we'd be going down the road, and I'd see an 18-wheeler coming the other way, and I just wish it would pull over there in our lane and just take us out, because I didn't want to live. It was just miserable. So I ended up joining the Navy when I was about 21 years old, and on a drunk bet, me and a friend of mine were drinking Jim Beam, which turned out to be was my drink of choice, Jim Beam whiskey. I loved it. And it was just right. It wasn't too harsh, it wasn't too sweet, didn't give me hangovers. And about a pint, I was perfect, but anything past that, who knows what's going to happen. I'd black out and never know what went on. But anyway, they had just bombed the Beirut, Lebanon over there. The Marines all got killed, and we were drinking and feeling all, what do you call it we want to be patriotic. That was it. I was like, "David, we need to go up there and join the Air Force." And we didn't plan on joining. We weren't going to join. I'm like, the Air Force is supposed to be easy. Their boot camp's they said you didn't have to run or nothing. So we go up there to the Lumberton, to the recruiters, and we go in there, we want to sign up on the buddy plan. They had a thing back then called the buddy plan, where they would guarantee you that you'd be with your buddy that first whatever. Of course, they lie. But, so we took the test and filled out all the paperwork, and I had a simple possession charge right out of high school for possession of marijuana, and he had flat feet, but he wasn't as smart as me. I passed the test, but my record wasn't clear. He didn't pass the test, but his record was clear. So the guy's like, "Well, I can't take you because you didn't pass the test." And he looked at me and said, "I can't take you because your record's not clear." He said, "But the Navy recruiter's right down the hall, and they'll take anybody." This was in 1983. We're in the middle of the Cold War. They just needed bodies. Nobody was signing up. The pace sucked. Nobody was joining the military. They were desperate. So we went down there, and sure enough, the guy was like, I was like, "Well," he's like, "Well, we can get you in." He's like, "We can have you in there by November." I was like, "Well, what about Christmas and Thanksgiving?" He's like, "Oh yeah, you get to go home for Christmas and Thanksgiving." It's during boot camp. I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, we'll fly you back up here." I was like, "All right, let's do it." So we're signing up. I didn't tell my parents or anything. I went home and was like, "Yeah, we joined the Navy." My dad's like, "When are you leaving?" I was like, "November 2nd or 4th, actually." I was like, we got to go up to Raleigh and get our physical and stuff. And we went up there, and sure enough, David's ass had flat feet, so he got set back. And here I am on a plane to Orlando, Florida, without him, the one that taught me into this stuff. And I tell you what, they're real nice to you until you say I do, and then they turn into assholes. I'm telling you right now, they were yelling at me and screaming, and I'm like, hold up now. That's ain't what I signed up for. But, it was an awesome experience. And that was the only 8 weeks I stayed sober from the time I was 13 until I got into Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's because you couldn't get nothing. Even the mouthwash was alcohol free. The first night that I was eligible to go out on town, I went and got drunk, and it was graduation weekend, and a lot of the guys had their parents and family coming up. I told my mom and dad, don't worry about it. I know y'all can't afford it. About 4 guys went to the liquor store and bought as much liquor as we could get, rented a hotel room, and got falling down drunk. And after I got in Alcoholics Anonymous and looked back about that, I knew about the physical craving. I knew that when I started drinking, I wasn't going to stop. I just, the more I drank, the more I want. But I thought, maybe if I ever got the right situation, I'd be able to put it down, and as long as I didn't drink, I'd be okay. But I didn't know about the mental obsession. I didn't know that whole 4 or 8 weeks or whatever it was, I was in boot camp. All I wanted to do, all I was thinking about was that first chance to go out and get drunk. Now, I wasn't going to do any drugs. No, that was a no-no. They told me that. It's like, you can drink all you want to, you got to stay off the other stuff. I had to get a waiver to get in because of that drug charge. I ended up getting shipped out to a shipping station out of San Diego. But they were in the Philippines on what called a Westpac tour. I don't know if anybody's ever been to Subic Bay, Philippines, but it's awesome. And that was the first place I went. And I'm a little country boy from Axton, North Carolina, who's never even really been in a bar. And they dropped me off at Clark Air Force Base, and I drive this damn thing around this mountain down here to Subic Bay. And I get there on that ship, and they're like, well, the first night we take, you're going to be on whatever the next day is, that'll be your duty day. But we're going to take you out and then show you a good time. And Subic Bay is the perfect place for that. You see, anything you can fantasize about is there. And I was like in heaven. I did not want to leave. And it was cheap. So the dollar to peso ratio was 21 to $1, and a beer was 2 pesos. You do the quick math. So that's like 8 beers for $1. For $5 of your cash, you could go out, get drunk, get a bag of weed this big, get Mama San and all her daughters to let you stay at their house, and you could do anything you wanted to, and you still come back with $3. There was guys that didn't even drink that went AWOL when we were in the Philippines. They went crazy. But I ended up, my problem was, I like to do more than drinking. At that point, within a week of being on that ship, I knew everybody that was doing what I was had done all my life, and I was hanging out with those guys. And it wasn't long. It took about 18 months, and I was on a bus coming back from San Diego, California, with envelopes that other than honorable discharge for drugs, alcohol, and behavior. And I thought my life was over. And you would think, at the time I would have been about 23 years old, maybe 24, that I would realize, it's right there in black and white, the U.S. government has diagnosed exactly what my problem is, that I would have enough sense to try to get some help. But you know what I did? They didn't have a bus station here in Aberdeen at the time, so they took me to Fayetteville. And I threw that paperwork right in the damn trash can right there in that bus station in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I called my mom. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. And she did just like she always does. She got up, got in that car, drove up there and picked me up. And she, I told some lie about they gave me early leave or something because I'd been such a good sailor. And they kept asking me, well, when you got to go back? I was like, well, they're supposed to send me a letter. But, just like the school, they did send a letter, and it wasn't addressed to Chuck. It was Mom and Daddy, and it told them what had happened. And by this time, my younger brother, was having issues, and he had, he was doing the same things I was doing, so we started linking up, and that's when we started getting on some of the harder stuff. And I'm gonna rush this thing on through, and I got into construction, and I started out in heating and air, and I'm gonna tell one more drinking story. And I ended up getting a DUI, my one and only DUI in 1987. And I'll tell you where it was at. Where the police station is right now on US 1 used to be a restaurant. It was a seafood place. Now, I've been down there where I grew up doing what I do. Instead of drinking liquor, I was drinking beer. If I'd been drinking liquor, I'd never got in the car and drove that night because I've been passed out over in the corner. But I was drinking beer and snorting stuff. And I come down US 1, and I had a natural light. My mom and dad lived right up here on Pine Street, right down from the men's halfway house. And just as I was rolling down the window, I tossed that natural light, and I always drank glass balls. I couldn't stand a canned beer. I looked over, and that sucker was headed right for a police cruiser, and it bounced off his windshield. I was like, this ain't good. So I turned right up there, and at that time, the Aberdeen police station was right there where that little bank is at the stoplight. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, right there in downtown Aberdeen. That's where they cornered me, and they 5 of them. I mean, they come out of nowhere, folks. I just wanted, if I knew if I could just get to Mom and Daddy's house and get in my bed, everything's going to be all right. They slammed my ass on that on the hood of that car, and I was like, look, I'm just going home. It's right over there. The guy was like, you're not going home. You're going to Carthage, son. So the sheriff's deputy grabbed me up, and they took me up there. And you know what I did? I made that phone call to Mama. She got up out of that bed and came and got me. And the next day, we went down there and got that car. Luckily, they didn't impound it. They just left it parked there. And but anyway, I ended up going to court. Lost my license, of course. Community service. And while I was doing community service, my heating and air guy, he fired me because one of the requirements was you got to have a driver's license. He's not going to drive you over there to do the job and drop you off. So I met this guy, and we were doing our community service, and he's like, I got a big construction job going on over at the community college, and I'm looking for help. If anybody needs a job, I raised my hands like I do. That's how I got into electrical work. I've been an electrical contractor. September will be 25 years since I've been in business, but that's how I got my start in electrical in business. And I've had customers for the last 25 years that ask me, so how'd you get into electrical work? Now, I can't tell them that story. I'm like, my brother had a company, or I made some lie up, or I worked for my dad was with CP&L. Somehow they think that's connected. But that's how I got into it. That was a blessing. That's one blessing that happened to me because it's been really good to me. And I traveled around for years, off and on, and stayed in hotels and did big commercial jobs with this same crowd and these guys. And that same guy died a few years ago. He died he was alcoholic too. I'll say it now, since he's gone. But he had his liver went out. He was a super nice guy, and he gave me an opportunity. And it's been great for me. And I'm grateful for the people in my life, whether they were really helping in a way or not, because everybody's got their issues. But I'm going to get sober now. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to go over to the meeting start a little later, so I'm going to try to wrap this thing up a little bit. But, I ended up coming to AA. Like I said, my brother went to treatment in 92 over there at Pinehurst Treatment Center. And that's started coming to meetings and eventually surrendered. Got a sponsor, Raymond Worrell. Super guy. Just a super guy. Saved my life. AJ knows him. AJ and him got sober like months apart, 1984. And I met Raymond over at the Episcopal meeting on Monday night. It was a speaker meeting back then. Had an NA downstairs, speaker meeting upstairs. Cheryl S. was chairing that meeting that night. And before the meeting, she said, look, if you need a temporary sponsor, see me after the meeting. And I was scared to death. I'd been coming to meetings down here at Aberdeen, and I'd talk to people and look around, but I wasn't going, unless you approached me I wasn't going to initiate. I wasn't going to ask somebody to be my sponsor. I was scared. But I was ready. I was ready to get sober. And I went up to her after that meeting that night, and she said, "Hang on just a second." And she turned around, and Raymond came over there, and he shook my hand. And he said, "Here's my phone number. You call me tomorrow." And he said, "We'll get together this weekend." And I assumed he was going to interview me and see if I was good sponsee material. And what happened was I met him over there that Sunday. That was on a Monday night. That following Sunday, I guess he wanted to see if I was really serious. He said, "Well, meet me Sunday." And we went over to the 2 o'clock speaker meeting. And after that meeting, we went and got a cup of coffee. And he didn't ask me nothing about my drinking. He told me his story. He 12-stepped me right there. And we didn't have anything in common. I mean, he had never taken a drug in his life. He only drank beer. He's country from the mountains as they come. But it was something about that guy that I knew he was going to be good for me because he's the opposite of what I was. And we started working. And he would, he only had 3 things that I had to commit to. He wanted me to do 90 meetings in 90 days. I was like, I can do that. He wanted me to call him every day at 7 o'clock, 7 days a week. And we didn't have cell phones. I mean, I had to be at a phone that was hooked to a line, to a wall. And he was there, and he answered that phone every day. And the conversation would go something like this. This was 3 or 4 nights a week. He's like, "Well, yeah," and we would talk about my day. And he would, I would start complaining about something, and he would change the conversation with something like, "Well, it sure was a beautiful day, wasn't it?" And, before I knew it, whatever was bothering me, I completely forgot about it. And then he would say something like, "Well, yeah, I think I'm going to head over to that Thursday night speaker meeting." And he would wait for me to ask for a ride to get picked up, because he knew I needed to be humble enough to ask for help. And he would come by my mom and dad's house and pick me up, and we would go to a meeting. And this went on for about my first 90 days or so, and I ended up getting my driver's license back because that DUI in 1987, I never went and took those classes, so I never got my license back. I only took it for a year. So about 3 months into sobriety, I was eligible. I went and took the classes because I was able to come up with some money, and I wasn't worried about them locking me up for dirty drug tests or anything, because I was doing good. I ended up getting my license, and I was able to take myself to meetings, but we still would hang out. And he took me through the steps. I went out to his house and did a 4th and 5th step. And I was so pissed off because he took my 4th step and balled it up and threw it in the trash. He didn't even look at it. I was like, "Are you freaking kidding me?" I mean, do you realize how much work I put in, how much time I put into putting that off before I actually did it in about 30 minutes? I mean, that was a 4-month 4th step that really only took 30 minutes, okay? Let's be honest. So he knew, and then I told him my 5th step. And I told him everything, and for some reason I was able to trust that guy. And, for the first 10 years of my sobriety, he was my sponsor, and he ended up moving back up he remarried and moved back up to the mountains. His wife had died the year before I got sober. From what I understand, they were like an AA power couple. She was Al-Anon, he was AA. They would do the talks where he would do half and she would do, everybody knew them. Everybody knew Ray and Betty. And, we would go all over the place speaking. He would speak, I would go with him, and it would be a 3-hour trip and eventually I would know I was in trouble because we would be at a meeting and I would see him talking to somebody and he would start looking around like, shit, I'm going to speak somewhere, because he would start putting me on it. And then those guys that he would pick up, I started going to pick them up, like John Parks out there. And, I inherited him from Raymond. Raymond lived 3 miles from John. For me, it's 30 minutes there, 30 minutes to the meeting, 30 minutes carrying him home, it's a 3-hour meeting. Thank God gas was cheap back then, but they kept me sober. I will say about 6, 8 months sober, one of the guys from Bethesda's like, "Glenn Green wants to see you." I was like, "What the hell does Glenn Green want to see me for? I ain't no halfway house." So I went down there to see Mr. Green. And he offered me a job. He's like, "We need a night manager." I'm like, "A night manager?" He's like, "Yeah." It's like, "We need you 3 nights a week. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday." Or it might have been Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. I don't remember the exact date. I was like, "Well, what exactly is it I'm going to do?" He's like, "You're going to take these boys to meetings. You're going to drive the van." I was like, "You just want me because I got a license." at that time, Bethesda was a full detox. It wasn't like it is now. I mean, I had to go take these classes on how to dispense drugs and what all these. I was like, shit, I've been knowing how to dispense drugs. Don't tell me nothing. You open the bottle and you just tell them, you throw them over there. But what that did for me was, instead of me, about that 3, 4, 5, 6 month period is when people start, easing out the door, getting away from the program. Things are getting a little better. You got a car, you got a phone, you got a girlfriend, you're not in trouble at home, you're not in trouble at work. All of a sudden, Alcoholics Anonymous isn't a priority anymore. For about 9, 10 months, I worked down at that halfway house 3 nights a week. And that meant I had to go to meetings because that was my job. And I'm grateful for that. So about 6 years ago, Glenn called me up and asked me if I'd be willing to sit on the board of that halfway house. I said I sure would. And I've been a board member with those guys for about 6 years. Raymond moved away. I ended up getting John M. as my sponsor. And that's when we had, about the same time we started the home group. And he moved back to Michigan after about 4 years. And I immediately asked Mitch S. I guess I can say his name. He's passed away. Mitch Stevens, great guy who'd been there from the time I'd gotten sober. Early on, him and his brother Dwayne and Mitch's wife Cheryl, all a huge part of my early sobriety. And Mitch was my sponsor for 14 years. And in 2015, my dad died, and we knew he had cancer. And thank God he didn't have to suffer, because it was the week before he was going to go start chemo. He died. He had a heart attack or something. I don't know. They called me. I had been over there that morning. I was the last one of us to see him, other than my mom. And my mom had been showing signs of dementia, and we had to start taking care of her full time, around the clock. She was incapable of, taking care of herself. And for 5 years, up until 2020, she passed away in January 2020, January 5th. They were exactly 5 years and a week apart from when they died. He died December 29th, 2015. And that was hard. That was the toughest thing I've ever lived through, drunk or sober. Because to watch your loved one have to live like that. And not only that, the turmoil between the 5 kids, and 4 of us were on the same page. There was one that didn't want to go along. That caused as much drama and hardship, especially to my sisters, as could possibly be done. And I'll tell you what, I'll be honest with you, I didn't think about drinking because I wanted to drink. I thought about drinking so I could get the hell out of there and I had to be responsible. But I was able to make it through it. My mom passed away, and I was grateful because she was suffering. Her quality of life sucked. I mean, I wouldn't want anybody to have to go through that. And I'll tell you right now, I'm not going to go through that. I've got friends, and we've got pacts that if we get like that, we're going to do what we got to do. So I'm not living it nobody, changing my diaper. You can forget it. If I can't get up and walk around and know who I am or know who you are, why would I want to be on this earth? Then Mitch got sick. He died in early February, about 3 weeks after my mom died. And the last time I saw him was at the funeral home up there at Bowles, when we came by with my mom's, the day before her funeral. And he was out of the blue. I mean, I don't know. I heard he was sick, and I called Richard, and Richard's like, "Oh, he passed away." And I was like, "What?" Wow. This was like I'm in the middle of mourning my mom. And then COVID hit. Boom, right after that. Thank God my mom and him both were able to have their funerals and stuff where everybody could go. And, we couldn't go to meetings for a while, and I kind of liked it. I'm an isolator anyway, and I was still able to work and stuff, and things got back to normal. We started going back, having meetings and stuff. And, got back enthusiastic about Alcoholics Anonymous, because, that time away just showed us how much we were missing. And then Richard called me, I guess it was around sometime in June, about speaking down here for the anniversary. And I got a text from Cheryl. Cheryl S., same person who introduced me to Raymond all those years ago. And she wanted to know if I'd heard about Raymond. She'd attached the obituary. I hadn't heard he had died. And he passed away on June 25th, 90 years old with 38 years sobriety. And just the obituary said he died suddenly. about 4 days later, I'd come to a noon meeting on Thursday, and I went to the post office. As soon as I pulled up the post office, I recognized his daughter, Tara, was in there. And I knew who she was. She knew who I was, and we never talked or anything. We just kind of, she knew that her dad had helped me. And she was a little girl when he got sober. And, she's like, is that your man? Are you all Raymond? I said, yes, ma'am. I said, are you Raymond's daughter? She said, yeah, I am. And I said, well, what happened? Did he have a heart attack? She said, no. He'd been out working in his garden that morning. Him and his wife, Susan, and the dog loaded up, were going to Mount Airy to get groceries. A drunk driver ran a red light, T-boned him, and killed him. My initial reaction was exactly what yours was, but then immediately, everything that guy told me popped into my mind. It's like, in his voice, Chuck, but for the grace of God. You know how many times I drunk? I don't know how I got home or where I'd been. You know how many times I did things that I don't know what happened, And then the next thought was, what a better way to go that maybe this person, this is going to be what they need to get sober, to turn their life around. Maybe they're going to come into Alcoholics Anonymous and help hundreds of guys get sober through their experience. And he was 90 years old with 38 years of sobriety. And if you're new in here tonight, we don't care what you've done. We don't care where you've been. We don't care what you believe. We don't care what your sexual orientation is, what color you are, whether you speak English or not. All we care about is what you want to do about your drinking. And when I walked in here 29 years ago into that room and I held my hand out for help, the only question they asked me was, what do you want to do about your drinking? Nobody asked me where I've been. Nobody asked me what I did for a living. There was no requirements. So if you're new in here tonight, we love you and we're glad you're here. Now, if you've been around here a little while, we love you and we're glad you're here. And what I'd like to say tonight is, to the old timers that are in here, it's our responsibility to help these guys. And my friend Darrell C. from down there in Ellerby, every time he would talk, would say the same thing. They say, if you've worked the first 9 steps of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, you're no longer here for yourself. You're here for the new man. Thank you.